you know, you look at a wrestling audience of 100%, 80% don't even know what TNA is. I'm part of that 20% that appreciates that TNA is here. You know what I'm saying? So
at least that they're trying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're not dropping $35 on their pay-per-view though.
No, not yet. But you know what I mean? I mean that's kind of an example where people don't give TNA a chance, but then when they bring in these former WWE stars, people say, all right, you know, and that just shows that the bigger names, basically my point that I'm trying to prove is it just shows that if you bring bigger names into a company, it generates more interest, you know what I mean? And for an old school TNA fan like myself who used to love watching those Wednesday night pay-per-views for $9 where AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels, they were your headliners, you know, back in the day. And I know you can't put them on Spike TV and expect them to draw a rating. I know that the names like Sting and Kurt Angle and Kevin Nash and, you know, the Bobby Lashley's are going to draw more than those guys, but it's just interesting for somebody that, you know, doesn't watch a lot of TNA, but then you see him bringing in former WWE stars, and you say, you know what, maybe I'll give this a shot, or maybe I'll check it out on Thursday nights, you know.
But that's just it's the reality. You know, a great example, the Yankees. I mean, they bring all these big wig names onto their team and pay whatever enormous amount of money to bring them in. But the reality is they're household names, and that's what in the situation where TNA is at, where it's you know, I believe Panda Energy, I believe, is the owner of TNA, and obviously with Jeff Jarrett, you know, they've invested a lot of money in the program, but at the same time they're smart investors. They're not going out there and just buying the farm only to compete against the WWE, because in reality it's not going to happen. It's only going to take, you know, I mean, it may take 10 years from today in order for them to even compete against the WWE. The great reality is just it allows the boys to work somewhere else and then to be in front of a national audience, which of course is TNA.
You know, and it's cool because the people that hate on TNA, I mean, you don't hate on TNA, but you know, a lot of these people in the chat room, they won't even give TNA a chance. You know what I mean? And people like that, to see it, I mean, I remember when they first debuted on Spike TV, and they drew a 0.8, 0.9, and now on a weekly basis, it's consistent 1.3s, 1.2.
It's beating ECW for that matter.
Yeah,
if you really, you know, if it's those fans that are like squashing, you know, TNA and say, it sucks. I mean, the reality is it's actually beating a WWE program. Yeah, granted, it's ECW, but you know what? It's still beating ECW.
Yeah, but you know what? ECW also gets plugs on Monday Night Raw. You know what I mean? Watch ECW, and you have a 3.7 rating tuned into that. So they get major plugs, you know what I mean? So for TNA, without those plugs, they don't have those plugs on Monday Night Raw or any vehicle to promote, you know what I mean? I mean, that's just your diehard fan base that seems to be growing every week, you know what I mean? I mean, we'll see what Bobby Lashley can do. I always say you can never judge one name. I don't think one name can come in and draw. I think you'll draw. I mean, it'll be interesting to see if they go to a 1.4 this week. It won't be like a 1.5 or a 1.6 or anything like that, just because Lashley came in. But a 1.4 would be a new record, and would be interesting to see if Lashley is a big enough draw to at least pop a little bit higher of a rating, a record rating.
Well, I think not only that, but of course, you know, changing the titles to Mick Foley was an awesome idea of booking. I mean, right now there's a pace that's changing right now within TNA, and to have Lashley and to have Taz in, you know, unfortunately you lost some of your younger stars that were let go not too long ago, but now you've picked up some really good name calibers in the business, and on top of that, you give one of the biggest household names in this industry, Mick Foley, the championship title. Granted, Sting could have kept it, but reality is it was a smart move to switch it over to Mick Foley. Well, it just goes to show you the landscape of TNA.
And it also looks like Taz doesn't want to wrestle, you know what I mean, when he comes to TNA. And it looks like they're going to pair him with Samoa Joe as a manager to Samoa Joe when he comes in, which will be cool because that's somebody like Taz that's putting over a younger talent like Samoa Joe, you know what I mean, an original guy, back to my Wednesday nights, you know what I mean, where Samoa Joe is the main eventer. So you pair somebody up, you know, Taz with Samoa Joe. I like that in TNA. You kind of give him the rub. Not that Joe needs a lot of rub anyway, because Joe's, you know, I mean, back to the Wednesday night pay-per-views, for a diehard TNA fan or a diehard indie fan, you obviously know who Samoa Joe is. Even WWE fans know who Samoa Joe is. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with him. Let's talk about. Actually, let me plug the chat. Look at all those people in the chat, man. Lots and lots of people in the chat. WZROnline.com /chat. UFC. Let's get rid of some of this stuff first, and then we'll go into Lockdown, Monday Night Raw, and then in hour number 2, we'll run down the Backlash card, which is coming up this Sunday night on pay-per-view, and we'll take your live phone calls, do chat shout-outs, and other things like that. UFC Saturday night. You didn't order, right?
Nah, actually, I was in the city. I had dinner with some friends and didn't catch it. So this is all on you.
All right, we had UFC, and basically the 2 main events. We had a double main event. One of them being Chuck Liddell versus Shogun Rua. And, Chuck looked decent during the fight, but one punch, man. One punch, and what a vicious knockout. And they came on the opening video package of UFC 97 this past Saturday night. They came on, and they said, if Chuck loses, this is going to be his last fight. He's never going to fight again. Chuck came in and said, I've got a new technique, a new strategy. This is a new Chuck that you're going to
got a new routine. Got a new routine.
Yeah, brand new Chuck Liddell. And then he came out and he looked all right, and I thought he had it. And then one punch, and Chuck dropped to the ground. And I'm a huge fan of Chuck. And Joe Rogan in the post-fight interview, he's saying stuff like, Chuck, you've had a great career, da-da-da-da-da-da. You've been knocked out 4 out of your last 5 fights, da-da-da-da-da-da. Trying to get him to say, retire, dude, retire. And Chuck's like, yeah, I don't know. I'm going to go backstage, and I'm going to think about it and see where we go. And Joe Rogan's like, all right, man, once again, you've had a great career, dude. I wish you the best.
It was kind of like he was, sealing his fate for him.
Yeah, dude, exactly. You could tell Joe Rogan was just like, oh, man, retire. Oh, Joe Rogan! Huh? You ever see that on the Chappelle show?
Yeah.
You've never seen it? Come on, dude, where he says, oh, Joe Rogan's in the... Come on, dude. You know
on what show?
On the Chappelle show, Dave Chappelle.
Oh, Chappelle show. I thought he said, I don't know. I don't know what you said, actually. I didn't understand what you said. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. Joe Rogan's awesome. He's a cool guy. But, all right, and then in the main event, dude, we had, who was it? We had Anderson Silva against Tails Leites. And in that fight, I mean, Dana White in the post UFC 97 press conference said it was one of the worst fights that he's ever seen in UFC history. Worst main events. You had a Canadian crowd that was chanting boring and GSP during the main event, who was sitting at ringside but wasn't even involved in a fight. It was just brutal. Anderson Silva would get him on the ground, and then he'd stand up and say, get up. And this went on and on and on. Ladies would get on the ground, Anderson would say, get up. Ladies would get on the ground, Anderson would say, get up. And this happened more than 20 times. It just happened over and over and over. And so it was a horrible UFC. We had a bunch of people here in the new place for that, and not a good way to end that show for sure. The Chuck fight should have been the main event of that, but nonetheless, nobody cares about UFC anyway. But I thought I'd mention that.
They care somewhat.
Yeah,
crossover. Crossover appeal. I'm interested.
They don't want to see Lesnar versus Lashley, and that's going to happen, man. Eventually, that's going to happen, without a doubt. It may not be in 2009. It could be by the end of 2009, but if not 2009, 2010. I would expect to see that fight. And as far as Chuck Liddell is concerned, in the UFC 97 post-press conference, Dana White said that he cared for his fighters and he wouldn't let Chuck fight again. He wouldn't let him do it. If that's the case, and Dana sticks to his word, which he never does, he talks a lot of stuff and then he'll reverse it the next day. But, if Chuck were to go and Chuck doesn't want to retire, which I don't think he does, and I don't think Dana would let him go from UFC. So if Chuck says he wants to fight, Dana has no choice but to re-sign him, because if he doesn't, he'll go to a Strike Force or a promotion like that. You know what I mean? Which is going to be on CBS.
You fall in danger. I mean, in the last, you said 4 to 5 fights, he's been knocked out. So I mean, his credibility I mean, granted, it would be kind of like, a Flair going to TNA for, like, PR purposes. I mean, if a Lindell, decides to end up going somewhere, then obviously, I don't know what type of role he'll
I don't think Dana. See, Chuck is UFC's biggest star, one of the biggest stars ever. You know what I mean? I mean, that would be like Triple H jumping to TNA. You know, it would be that big. I mean, Chuck is like